Hello and welcome back to Communications. This is now week 12. We only have a couple more weeks to go before we finish up this course. And for the last set of slides in the video lecture, I want to still focus on the research report. But here I want to sort of do a brief audience analysis and thinking about the communication model that you want to use, the fact that you want to present enough information for the viewer or the reader, or at least the audience of some sort or another, to understand what you're saying. So you need to consider the background knowledge that you need to present to them, of course, that you need to have yourself in order to be knowledgeable, the purpose and intent of your paper, and in writing and revising for an audience, knowing that that audience will be interested in your material, but may not be well versed in some of the specific technological terms. So that's kind of what I want to do for this set of slides. Okay, so what level of background knowledge does the intended audience have is an important question, because it is a question that you should ask yourself as you are putting together your paper and wondering, okay, how in depth do I need to go? Obviously, you don't need to explain the laws of gravity, but let's say some sort of thermodynamic principle, hydraulic principles, these kinds of things maybe are not as clear to the average reader as you may think, because this is something you're really comfortable with. It could be digital marketing, it could be whatever. So the knowledge of the topic is one that you should consider in terms of the audience. They'll be interested, but they may not have that understanding. The experience that a person may have in the field. If you're writing a case study for someone in the field, clearly the degree of knowledge is much higher than the quote-unquote average reader. And then relevant technical skills, clearly you need those in order to be able to understand those very things that you are talking about. So what does this boil down to? It does this. The level of knowledge or experience that you have as the writer should match to a certain degree the level of knowledge and experience possibly that the reader has or the viewer has. So if you are writing for the average person, whatever that may be, the lay person as they call them, clearly you need to stop and identify concepts. If it's a technician who is informed or an expert, then clearly that's less likely. Now, there may be terms in the field that you are examining and studying and writing about that there may be some discrepancy or some controversy over what something means. At that point, it doesn't hurt to clarify the position you are taking relative to a particular term. I've mentioned before in philosophy the word dialectic is something that really is not contentious, but it has multiple meanings. And it's never a bad thing to identify which kind of dialectics you're going to be using, because different philosophers throughout the history of that field have come up with different forms of it. So that's just one example. But it doesn't matter if the field, will have its own controversies. Be aware of them and be aware that, you need to maybe define certain terms because you may be using them going against a trend or against common knowledge. If you're doing that, you need to call attention to it. What does the audience intend to do with the information provided in the document? Well, at the very least, they want to read through it because they are interested. And for the most part, a research report in a classroom setting, in an academic setting, is to gather information and to present that information to the potential reader. You may be trying to solve a practical problem, a metaphysical problem, some sort of existentialist dilemma. Again, climate change, right? That's a very practical problem, a very real problem. Some of the things that we can do that are sort of significant in our own lives, but together would make some degree of impact. So are you asking someone to make a decision, right? That's a question you could pose. And if it is something where we should consider a different way of living or a different way of thinking, then clearly you're asking someone to embrace and endorse the position that you are presenting in your paper. So yes, make a decision ? Yes, you're asking your reader to change something about themselves, the way they think or the way they act. Okay, so the individual in this case, myself, who's requested the report. Am I interested in the report? Absolutely. I'm looking forward to reading many of them. In fact, I'm looking forward to reading all of them. I just realized what I said. yes, I'm looking forward to reading all of them, because what I really enjoy when I let students write on their own subjects is I get a much wider range of topics. So as a reader, that's good. That's really good for me. So yes, I am interested in the document you are putting together and will be presenting and submitting to me in a couple of weeks. Okay, what are their needs or my needs? All I ask is for clarification. So if you're using a term that's either controversial or new or specific to the field, please clarify by way of either a glossary, a footnote, an endnote. It could be a definition right in the body paragraphs, and then you're going to go from there. So what will I do with the information? Well, depending on what it is, I'm going to, at the very least, learn something, right? At bottom, knowledge is good. So if that's the case, I will learn something new, depending on the content, the main topic or the main thesis. I may consider changing my mind about something. I may also consider changing the way I act, the way I behave towards others, towards the climate, towards society in general. So all those things really factor into thinking about and analyzing your audience. What do you want your audience to do, right? What's the takeaway? Okay, so if you consider your audience's attitude towards a topic, in my case, I am interested. By this point, you probably know that I'm very concerned about the climate. I'm also very concerned about, a whole range of other things. And for others, I am at the very least interested. I'd like to know more. I like to learn things. I read voraciously. You can see behind me a whole wall full of books. I have read probably 90% of those books. So, all I ask you to do, though, is to identify concepts and terminology that the reader should be expected to know, but may not know it for sure. So, always err on the side of caution. And one of the ways in which you can do it is, if you think that a reader may potentially know something, may know a definition to a term, you can put it as an endnote or as a footnote. That way, if I know what that means, I can just skip right through it. Right? I skim through the text, and I don't worry so much about the endnotes. But if it's something that is unique or very new or very, very specific to even one part of that field, always stop to clarify. Okay, so are there multiple audiences in this particular case? Technically, no. That is just me. But think about working in the professional field where you are going to write a paper or a case study, a feasibility study, a recommendation study of one sort or another for your immediate superior. So the head of your department has asked you to write a paper, and you're going to work with a couple of other people and do the research, present that research, and then you may have to present it to a completely different group of people. Let's say you are working in Department X, and you will now need to present that paper to Department Y. And Department Y could be a room full of accountants, right, who may or may not know the knowledge you have collected and gleaned from your research. You need to explain to these accountants what these various terms mean, because they may now be saddled with a task of having to either change the budget for the next quarter, the next year, because that's part of the reason why they're there. Although the report was generated from a different department, the accounts department need to know about this because they need to make changes that are going to reflect the recommendations that you may have in your paper. So there's a primary audience. In an academic setting, it's me. I will listen to and I will read the paper, and I will be interested in reading it. But in the work environment, the professional environment, there could be secondary audiences. So keep those people in mind as well. Okay, so if you have sort of a short summary that you want to write for people so that they can get a sense of what's going on, that should be sort of less than 2 pages. Just a brief summary. This is the main overview of this particular text. We're going to look at the following things, and we're going to make this recommendation. A primary audience for sure. There could be an appendix or some kind of glossary for that secondary audience if need be. But again, you can get around that problem by simply sort of assuming that not everyone will understand all the terms, every single one of them. So you want to be able to turn around and say, let's just stop and clarify these terms so everyone understands what we're doing with them. Okay, so purpose, needs, and background in terms of the audience. The purpose, is there enough information given? Will the reader be satisfied? As you read through it, you may find some gaps here and there where you've kind of skipped ahead to a new idea, maybe not fully unpacked the first one. When I did many rewrites for the book that hopefully will be out soon, that's what I did. I would constantly not criticize myself, but assume that I'm an unknowledged or one more time. A reader that isn't quite sure what's going on. That's what I'm trying to say here. And what I would do is constantly ask myself questions. Okay, what do you mean by this? How do we make this jump from here to here? And all of a sudden, just even one or two sentences smoothly transitions from one set of ideas to the next one, and it's not bumpy. I've given the reader enough information to even see why this segue even exists. Because when you just sort of present one chunk after another, it needs to be fully contained. So the purpose, is there enough information? Yes, have enough information so that those transitions make sense. For needs, does the document meet the needs of the situation? Hopefully the answer is yes. You have clarified to the degree that you can, because this is not a 50-page paper. You're going to be writing maybe 5 to 6 pages at the most. And we'll talk about this in more detail during the last couple of Zooms. But the needs are met in terms of clarifying to a reasonable degree the main topic and for sure the main thesis before you move on. And in the background, what level of detail matches the expectations. That's why I stress for writers to work on a majority of the body paragraphs before you kind of attempt an introduction or at least a summary. And why is that important? It's important because when you finish, for the most part, let's say even a second draft of the main body paragraphs, you can read through and just make quick sort of one sentence or even point form notes on the main ideas that are presented in each of the paragraphs. Take those and create an introduction out of those exact statements. And why is that a good thing to do? Because when you finish that introduction, it will reflect directly what is in the essay. Because if you write your introduction first and you kind of let the paper, the research essay, kind of shape itself, you may kind of move in different directions that aren't even addressed or acknowledged in the introduction or the summary. So write those after, right? Write those secondarily. I mean, you could give yourself kind of a rough outline and here's what I want to do. But go back and look and ask yourself, is that what I did, right? Did I actually do all those things? And that's where the summary, as well as the introduction, really becomes important, because you do want to present that essential message. Essentially, this is what we're doing. You want to present it in non-technical terms, because you haven't kind of begun to do a deep dive into the story, the main thesis. So you want to keep it fairly open and loose, so non-technical. At this point, you want to make it concise, but you want to also make it non-technical so that the reader, if they are really rushed, and if they're reading, this is also known as an abstract, right? An abstract at the beginning of a paper is pretty straightforward, right? It glosses over a few things for sure, but at the same time, though, it presents to you enough information that you will be able to say, yes, okay, this is enough information for me to go on that says, at this point here, you have enough to decide whether or not you want to read it. Now, in my case, of course I'm going to read it, but a summary should be that. It provides the essential ingredients of the paper, presents it in non-technical terms, and is concise. And that's essentially it. So, how do you write a summary? Well, pretty straightforward. You want to read through that original text. You want to reread and just underline or jot down some of the essential features. You want to possibly edit that underlined information. You want to make sure that you rewrite in your own words what is in the text. Now, if it is yours, you want to make sure that here a summary versus a paraphrase. This has more to do with collecting information. So just to be clear, like read the original, rewrite, edit, rewrite again. We're talking here about a summary that you need to present for your own paper. So you could do something like that. I would still use the information that you originally presented and make the summary out of that. So you're kind of doing the same thing as if you were reading a secondary source. The difference is you are reading your own. And so just make sure that your summary and your introduction reflect directly what is in the body paragraphs. Okay, so that's the first one. We're going to just come back in just a moment with the second set of 3, possibly 4 short videos on, again, writing a research report. So see you back shortly.